Hey folks, walk with me. It's a little noisy out here today, but hopefully it's going to be okay. We do have some crunchy leaves, some nice changing of the trees, so pretty nice fall day. I have been sort of clocking over the last several months a lot of the news stories and whatnot about the pending student loan forgiveness. And I just wanted to sort of consolidate my thoughts into one space for it. To clarify, I still have, and I'll talk about this in more detail, student debt from getting my degree. And I'll talk a little bit about how that took shape and what that looks like for me and sort of how it maybe contributes to my perspective. But I just wanted to make that clear from the get-go. And, I also know a lot of people. I grew up in a very blue-collar family, and so I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduate. And I feel like, if anything, I mostly understand the displeasure with the idea of some sort of student loan forgiveness from people who did not go to college at all, and who basically say, I had this other path and I took this other path, and it's not that they're necessarily being penalized for that, but there is this sort of consideration, or this concept of folks being given something when they are maybe already over profiting from a debt that they took on previously. And by that I mean, to the extent to which folks may be making more because they have some sort of degree or degrees for which they incurred some significant or insignificant amount of debt, and then they're being relieved of that. So they're making more money and then are also being relieved of the sort of money that it costs to get that degree, to then get a particular job in a field and make a particular amount of money. So I most understand the pushback from people who feel like it's people who sort of got themselves into a field of work or a degree or position that they're already making more money than some people, or maybe than many people, and then they're being relieved of their responsibility to pay back money that they took on. I understand that, and I'm not saying that I have an answer here, I just have a perspective, but I do get it. I think part of what I get caught up in sometimes, for better or worse, but just to be sort of upfront about it, is this idea that in some way, shape, or form, everyone must suffer. Right? That there has to be some mechanism by which suffering takes place, and then it takes hold, and then it persists. And so if for some folks that means that they foolishly, maybe under circumstances where they didn't have a clue what they were doing at 17, 18, 19 years old, didn't have a concept of the world, of the job market, of economics, of what debt meant for their future. And so maybe they got into it a bit too much, but that they must continuously suffer in the midst of a system that's maybe set up really poorly. And I think that that's a real problem that we have in the US, this concept of, if you want to get anywhere, if you want to be happy, if you want to feel contentment, safety, security, you must suffer. Whether that means you must have gone through some tremendous suffering already, and then you deserve your happiness, or you must persist in your suffering in order to, just be allowed to express your intrinsic value, to exist, and to pursue happiness, you know, as it says in a founding document that you might be aware of. You know, so that sort of shapes my perspective to a degree, is this concept of like, at some point, we've got to get past this foolish concept of suffering as not just a precursor to freedom and happiness and success, contentment, but as a rite of passage, right? That it's a must-be thing. Now, as it pertains to my personal sort of reaction to the idea that some people who have student debt will have it forgiven. Now, my particular circumstance, as it currently stands, my debt is nearly paid off. And I have maybe, well, if I wanted to, I could pay it off right now. But, you know, I'll probably pay it off within the next 2 to 4 years, something like that. And I know that there's this talking point out there of it's unfair to people who did incur debt and then did work hard to pay it off. I don't see that at all. And I'm not saying that people in my situation have to see it my way. Again, they could be in the exact same situation or even in a better situation and feel differently. That's totally fine. But from my perspective, I feel like the system is set up in a foolish way, right? Again, these universities and colleges are so profitable, and they're really, to some degree at least, preying on the unknowingness of very young adults. Sure, we call them adults, young adults, old kids, whatever, however you want to look at it. And then strapping them with sometimes unovercomable debt. And they don't have a concept at that. I know I didn't. I had no concept. And I just happened to get lucky, honestly. You know, to give you, you know, speaking of suffering, I can tell you a bit of what I went through, and that I still don't want to see people who are maybe doctors, lawyers, and maybe are doing relatively well. I still don't want to see them have to, you know, suffer to pay a debt that I feel is sort of put upon them in a relatively unfair way by a foolish system. So I didn't have any guidance going into college. I didn't have anyone paying for my college. I was lucky enough to be able to earn the highest academic scholarship that I could. So that went a long way. I was able to cobble together a couple or a few other, I think there were sort of like one-off scholarships. And then I went through, got my degree, still had no clue how debt, money, economics worked. I had no idea. And then probably after having been paying my loans for 4 or 5 years, something like that, I stopped paying my loans because for a period of time, I had no place to live. And so I was in a position where paying a student loan payment was way far down the list. You know, there was a period of time where I was subsisting on, I mean, at that point, Trader Joe's would have like, they'd put out like little clementines, tangerines, and they would have like a little place where you could get coffee while you were there. And I would make many meals out of that. And I would, when I didn't have a place to go and there was no other option, I would set a timer for 5 minutes and I would be at a 24-hour Starbucks, and I'd go into the bathroom and I would sleep on the floor. Yes, this is disgusting, but it's reality. Until the timer went off, and then I would go out and go back, and then I would do it again at some point. But obviously, I did a video on insomnia, and that's not a helpful anecdote for insomnia, that's for sure. So during this period, I didn't pay anything, and so I got into the terminology is escaping me, but I was well behind and penalized and everything else. When I got things turned around, I had a federal tax refund that was withheld and was sent to the loan company that I owed money to, and that prompted me to call them and go, okay, I screwed up. How do I start to fix this? And I got back on the horse. And like I said, now sort of in a situation where I could pay it off tomorrow if I wanted. It doesn't really make sense for me to at the moment. Like I said, I'm very few number of years away. And so I incurred all of that, right? And so I'm paying more than I would have ever paid had I not gone through certain circumstances and gotten far behind and so on and so forth, penalized and all that jazz. And still, I don't have a desire to have people who maybe, like I said, in much better circumstances with much more potential for high earning degrees, I don't want to see them have to pay it, because again, my position is, one, this stupidity around everyone must suffer no matter what the circumstances are, and two, that the system is set up in a really foolish way. And so until there's systemic reform around how the system is set up, and they're no longer making many millions, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars in profit on the backs of very young adults who oftentimes don't know what they're getting into, until there's reform around that, I don't have any problem with loans being forgiven from people who were taken advantage of. And if that happens, maybe that will help spur some reform. But it's a really stupid way to set up an education, higher education system in order to get jobs that we desperately need, right? Nurses, doctors, teachers. I mean, these are things that require degrees, and in many cases, many degrees, and sometimes many degrees plus certificates, plus continuing education certificates. I mean, it's never ending. And so providing some relief to people who got drawn into a really poorly set up system because they wanted to pursue something that they were drawn to, or that is very admirable, I don't have a problem with that. So that's my take on the situation. I hope that it happens, but my biggest reason for hoping that it happens is because I hope that it does something to incentivize whoever goes about setting the system up this way and then persisting in it this way, that it incentivizes them to change it, because that's what really needs to happen, as opposed to just student loan forgiveness and then carry on your merry way exactly as you are. All right, folks, that's my soapbox. You didn't know that I could both be on a soapbox and be walking for 14 minutes, I bet, but we did it. So if you walked along with me, we got a pretty nice step count in there. And if you didn't, but you watched this far, I really appreciate it. And as always, I will see you in the next video.